Jalen Brunson, has officially undergone surgery. But just as Knicks fans were hoping for good news, team owner James Dolan shared a new update that's left many wondering what it could mean for Brunson and the Knicks moving forward. Let me break down what's happening. The news breaks 3 weeks after being named Finals MVP. Jalen Brunson went under the knife. Tuesday morning, word started spreading through NBA insider circles that the Knicks captain had checked into a hospital for a procedure on his left wrist, the same wrist he'd been shooting with all postseason. New York Knicks star point guard Jalen Brunson underwent surgery on his left wrist Tuesday, and the NBA Finals MVP is expected to return to basketball activities later this summer, sources told ESPN. The timing hit fans like a gut punch. Just weeks earlier, the city had thrown a parade. Now here's their franchise player, fresh off the best run of his career, laid up recovering from surgery nobody knew was coming. Here's what makes this story land the way it does. Brunson never said a word about it. Not during the Eastern Conference Finals, not during the finals, not in a single press conference. Brunson played through the left wrist injury during the Knicks championship run. Sources told ESPN he just kept playing, kept scoring, kept setting records. Ian Begley of SNY was one of the first reporters with real details, and his sourcing painted a picture of a guy who'd been managing pain for weeks without telling anyone outside his inner circle. According to Begley, Jalen Brunson will be rehabbing for at least 2 months following his surgery to repair injury in his left forearm, wrist area. And the procedure happened on a Tuesday, with Brunson having played through discomfort in the area during the finals run. That's the headline that stopped Knicks Twitter cold. 2 months, minimum. For a guy who trains like his life depends on it. 2 months of no shooting, no ball handling, nothing is a brutal sentence. The organization didn't get ahead of it either. This wasn't a press conference. This wasn't a scheduled announcement with team doctors standing behind a podium. No details of Brunson's injury or scheduled surgery had been released by the team, and it was expected that the Knicks would provide an official release later that Tuesday. The news broke through reporters first, and the team followed. Multiple outlets scrambled to confirm the same story from different angles. The New York Post's Stefan Bondi had it. So did The Athletic. So did the Associated Press, which got its own team source to confirm what was happening inside the organization. Jalen Brunson has undergone left wrist surgery and is expected to be back on the court when the New York Knicks begin defense of their NBA title, a person with knowledge of the details said, with the NBA Finals MVP expected to resume basketball activities later this summer. What stood out immediately was how careful everyone around the team was being with language. Nobody wanted to call this a crisis. Nobody wanted to call it minor either. The team's messaging, filtered through people close to the situation, tried to thread a needle, serious enough to require surgery and 2 months of recovery, but not serious enough to threaten the start of next season. Even so, the exact nature of the injury took days to nail down, and different outlets reported conflicting details before the picture came into focus. Some early reports had it as the right wrist. Others said left. The recovery window bounced between 6 weeks and 2 months, depending on who you asked. That confusion alone tells you something. This wasn't an injury the team had been transparent about while it was happening. One report, sourced separately from Begley's account, offered a slightly different version of events. Brunson underwent surgery recently to repair a tendon issue in his left hand and wrist, according to a source, with a recovery timetable of 6 to 8 weeks. That same report added a detail that made the story feel even heavier. The operation was performed at the hospital for special surgery. That's not a walk-in clinic. That's one of the most respected orthopedic surgery centers in the country, the kind of facility teams send their franchise players to when something needs to be done right the first time. And here's the piece that really made this update land with weight. This wasn't a fluke, one game tweak. Brunson dealt with discomfort during the finals, and it impacted his shooting, particularly early in games. But as adrenaline took over, it helped mask the pain, and he became more effective later in games. Read that again. He was playing through pain that got worse in the biggest games of his life, and the only reason it didn't show up more was adrenaline covering the discomfort. That's not toughness as a cliche. That's a guy hiding an injury well enough that opposing coaches, teammates, and reporters had no idea it was happening in real time. So now the Knicks organization is left holding an update that's part relief, part reality check. Relief, because doctors and insiders both suggest this isn't the kind of injury that lingers into the season. Reality check, because their best player just spent an entire championship run compromised, and nobody outside a small circle knew it. Section 2, what the wrist actually cost him to understand why this update matters so much, you have to go back and look at what Brunson actually did while hurt. Because on paper, this looks like one of the great injury postseason double stories in modern NBA history. Start with the numbers. The 29-year-old averaged a playoff-high 28.4 points to go with 6.1 assists, 3.2 rebounds, and 1.2 steals in 36.9 minutes per game in the 2026 postseason, shooting 46.5% from the field, 36.3% from three-point range, and 84.6% from the foul line. That's an MVP-caliber stat line produced with a wrist that needed surgery the moment the confetti settled. Now zoom into the finals specifically, because that's where the injury seems to have hurt him the most, at least statistically. Brunson posted a 42.1% field goal percentage in the NBA Finals, down from his 46.7% mark during the regular season, and one of the 5 worst shooting percentages for an NBA MVP, a number that drew criticism at the time, though credit still needs to go to a tough opposing defense. Fans and analysts spent that series wondering why his efficiency had dipped. Nobody had the real answer. Now they do. But even with that dip, he still found ways to be devastating. Brunson also shot nearly 39% from beyond the arc and had a 53.6% true shooting percentage. So his overall shooting wasn't as poor as the field goal percentage makes it seem. A hurt Brunson was still a nightmare matchup. Then there's the game that will define this whole story for years. Game 5, the closeout. In that series, Brunson averaged 32.6 points, 4.2 rebounds, and 4.6 assists, and put up 45 points on 14 of 27 shooting in the series-clinching Game 5 comeback, which tied an NBA record for a road player in a series-clinching win. 45 points on the road to close out a championship, with a wrist that would need a surgeon 3 weeks later. That number puts him in company most players never sniff. Game 5 made Brunson the first Knick ever to score 40 points in an NBA Finals game, one of just 11 players in NBA history with a 45-point game in the Finals, one of only 6 to do it on the road, and one of just 4 ever to do it in a closeout game, a list that includes just Michael Jordan in 1998 and Jalen Brunson in 2026. Michael Jordan's name sitting next to Brunson's on that list was already remarkable. Finding out Brunson did it hurt makes it something else entirely. And it wasn't just that one night. Go back to the conference finals, where the whole run nearly died before it started. Brunson started that cold stretch by scoring or assisting on 27 of the Knicks' final 44 points, to erase a 22-point deficit against the Cavs, to snatch victory from the jaws of defeat, and put them up 1-0 in the conference finals. That comeback happened during the same stretch where his wrist was already bothering him. Brunson himself gave the smallest hint of what was going on, right after the title-clinching win, without ever naming the injury. Asked how he felt in the immediate glow of the championship, he told reporters he was hurting, adding that he wasn't going to lie about it, but that the opportunity had presented itself and he wasn't going to pass it up. At the time, everyone assumed it was normal playoff wear and tear. Now that quote reads completely differently. The clutch numbers make the whole thing even more absurd. Brunson delivered when it counted, scoring 38 clutch points during the postseason, while the rest of his teammates combined for 35. One guy with one bad wrist outscored his entire roster in the moments that mattered most. His own head coach was already trying to get people to take Brunson seriously as an MVP-level talent before any of this wrist news came out. After the 45-point outburst, Mike Brown told reporters that he'd said it before and hoped people would finally listen, calling Brunson a top 3 MVP candidate and pointing out that people mention his name in passing without taking it seriously enough. Now add a hidden surgery to that resume, and the argument gets a lot harder to ignore. Karl Anthony Towns backed that same sentiment up during the rough shooting stretch, brushing off any talk of Brunson struggling and instead pointing to the free throws and big shots that kept coming when the games were on the line, calling him a player who simply can't be messed with in winning moments. Put it all together, and you get a guy who set a franchise scoring record in a finals game, joined a list with only Michael Jordan for road closeout scoring, dragged his team back from a 22-point deficit, outscored his own bench in clutch minutes, and did every single bit of it with an injury serious enough to require a trip to one of the top surgical hospitals in the country. That's the price tag on this championship that nobody saw until the surgery news broke. Section 3. The front office's calculated silence. Now here's where the story shifts from, wow, he's tough, to wait, why didn't anyone say anything? because the Knicks organization, from the training staff to the front office to ownership's inner circle, appears to have known about this injury and made a decision to manage it quietly rather than disclose it. Teams do this constantly in the NBA. Injury reports during the regular season are one thing. The playoffs are another animal entirely, where teams famously withhold information to avoid giving opponents a roadmap. But this wasn't a hamstring tweak that showed up on an injury report with a vague label. This was a wrist and forearm issue serious enough to need a specialized surgical procedure, and it got managed in complete silence for the length of an entire championship run. Some reporting suggests the injury had been building for a while, not something that popped up suddenly in the finals. Weeks after the Knicks defeated Victor Wembanyama and the San Antonio Spurs in the 2026 NBA Finals, Jalen Brunson reportedly went under the knife to address a left wrist injury that had been bothering him, apparently in the NBA playoffs. That word apparently is doing a lot of work. Even insiders weren't entirely sure when this started. One outlet pointed out something that made the silence even more striking. Although Brunson never once mentioned having some sort of left arm or wrist injury throughout the playoffs, this is an injury that has clearly been bothering him for quite some time. And it wasn't isolated either. The same report noted he was dealing with more than one issue at once. The Knicks star also battled through ankle ailments during the playoffs and the 2026 NBA Finals against the San Antonio Spurs. So while the front office was publicly selling a story of a healthy, dominant roster steamrolling through the postseason, their franchise player was quietly nursing multiple injuries that never made it into a press conference. Why would an organization sit on this? Competitive advantage is the obvious answer. No team wants to hand an opposing coaching staff a scouting report that says attack his shooting hand. But there's another layer here too. Brunson signed below market value to help the front office build this roster in the first place, taking less than he could have gotten, so the team could go get difference makers. Brunson left $113 million on the table when he signed his contract extension with the Knicks in the summer of 2024, instead of waiting for his true, unrestricted free agency in 2025, a decision that gave the Knicks the financial flexibility to trade for Mikal Bridges and Karl Anthony Towns, then re-sign Bridges to a long-term deal. A guy who sacrifices that much money to build a winner isn't going to be the one, demanding the team announce his injuries mid-run. If anything, all the incentives point toward him pushing to keep it quiet himself, wanting to stay on the floor, no matter what the training staff privately knew. Once the title was secured, the posture changed almost immediately. Within about 3 weeks of the trophy presentation, the procedure was scheduled, and reporters were fed details in a coordinated wave. Begley on the recovery timeline, Charania on the return-to-play window, Bondi confirming the wrist. That's not an accident. That's a front office deciding the right moment to let information out is after the parade, not during the deciding games. The messaging that followed the leak was carefully calibrated too. Every single report emphasized the same reassurance. This shouldn't threaten next season. That would give Brunson nearly 3 months to recover from the procedure before the Knicks break camp and nearly 4 months before they begin the defense of their 2026 NBA championship. Even the outside experts, brought in for confirmation, stuck to that same script. The injury, barring setbacks, isn't expected to linger into training camp, according to James L. Edwards III of The Athletic. That kind of unified messaging across multiple separate reporters, all landing on the same reassuring note within hours of each other, doesn't happen by coincidence in professional sports. It happens when an organization's communications people get out ahead of a story and make sure the framing sticks before fans start panicking. And fans did start to feel the whiplash. One report captured it well, noting that barely a month removed from the highest of highs, the team suddenly had to face a very different kind of headline. Unfortunately, the honeymoon period might be coming to an end, as after an offseason that already saw them lose a key piece in center Mitchell Robinson, the Knicks just got some bad news about their best player, Jalen Brunson, who underwent surgery. That framing bad news stacking on top of bad news is exactly what the front office was trying to get ahead of with its carefully worded updates. Whether it fully worked is another question. because plenty of fans immediately started asking why this wasn't disclosed sooner, especially given how visibly it seemed to affect his shooting numbers during the finals. Once the surgery was confirmed, the entire conversation shifted to timelines, because for a defending champion, every single week of an off-season matters. This section is about the actual math the Knicks organization is now working with, and why insiders are split on how confident to be. The baseline number, repeated by nearly every source, sits at 2 months. Brunson underwent surgery to repair an injury on his forearm wrist area on a Tuesday, according to a report from Knicks insider Ian Begley of SNY, and will require at least 2 months of rehab and recovery before he returns to the court. Run that forward on a calendar, and here's what you get. NBA teams typically open training camp in late September, with preseason games beginning in early October and the regular season tipping off in late October. That would give Brunson nearly 3 months to recover from the procedure before the Knicks break camp, and nearly 4 months before they begin the defense of their 2026 NBA championship. On paper, that's comfortable. 2 months minimum. 3 months of actual runway before camp opens, even factoring in some ramp-up time to get game shape back. The projected numbers line up with him being ready when it counts. But not every report agreed on the exact window, and that discrepancy matters when you're trying to gauge how nervous to actually be. One outlet, citing a different source close to the situation, put the number lower. The recovery table per Schwartz is expected to be 6 to 8 weeks. That's noticeably shorter than the 2-month floor other reporters were using, which either means the injury is less severe than initially feared, or it means different sources are working off different information about what was actually repaired. Team-friendly voices leaned into the shorter, more optimistic framing wherever they could. One report broke down exactly why the September target should hold up. A 2-month recovery starting now puts Brunson on track to be cleared in September, and since training camp usually opens late that month, the timeline gives him real room before the season starts. That same report went further, stating flatly that nothing in these reports suggests Brunson will miss regular season games, and the surgery is happening now specifically, so it does not carry over into the next campaign at all. There's also a wrinkle worth mentioning. This isn't Brunson's first rodeo with wrist trouble. Brunson has dealt with wrist issues before in his career, so this is not new territory for him or his training staff. That history cuts both ways. It means the medical staff has a track record to lean on for how his body responds to this kind of injury. It also means this is a body part that's flared up more than once, which is exactly the kind of pattern that makes long-term durability questions fair game. The one worry that kept surfacing across multiple reports wasn't the timeline itself, it was the vagueness of it. The fact that he said at least 2 months is a bit concerning and leaves Brunson's status for the start of next season up in the air, with the 2026-27 NBA season set to tip off in October, meaning there's a chance he could be good to go for the start of next season, but that's assuming everything goes according to plan. In his recovery process, that last phrase, assuming everything goes according to plan, is the entire tension of this update in one sentence. Surgeries don't always go according to plan. Recoveries stall, setbacks happen, and the team itself hasn't exactly been forthcoming with hard numbers, which leaves fans reading tea leaves from unnamed sources instead of getting a straight answer from the organization. Begley, who's been the most consistently cited source through this entire saga, was upfront about the limits of what he actually knew. He acknowledged that the Knicks hadn't given a firm timetable for the return, though he sounded hopeful Brunson would be back for the new season, explaining that if there was ever a right time to get this surgery done, doing it now, right after the title, made the most sense for both player and team. That's about as honest as the reporting around this story gets. A lot of hope, built on a reasonable amount of runway, without a guarantee attached to it. The Knicks front office has effectively asked its fan base to trust the process on a recovery they can't fully verify from the outside, for an injury they didn't disclose until it was already fixed. What's not in question is what's at stake. If that trust turns out to be misplaced, a team coming off its first championship in over 5 decades doesn't get many chances to run it back with the same core. Every one of the pieces, Towns, Bridges, Hart, the deep rotation Leon Rose built around Brunson, was assembled specifically to complement a healthy version of the guy at point guard if September comes and goes and he's still not right. That whole equation changes fast. By the time all the reporting settled, the story had shifted from "is he hurt?" to something closer to "how much better does this make the whole run look?" That shift says a lot about how this update landed with the people who actually cover this team every day. ESPN's Monica McNutt put it plainly when asked whether the surgery news added to what Brunson had already accomplished. She said, "Absolutely, it certainly does," but was quick to add that Brunson comes from the kind of stock where, if he's on the floor, he's giving his best without excuses. And that finding out after the fact that there was an injury requiring surgery only adds to his lore and his status as the King of New York. That framing has stuck. What could have been a story about a front office managing bad news quietly has instead become a story about a guy who refused to let anyone know he was compromised until the trophy was already in his hands. The two aren't mutually exclusive. The organization clearly chose its timing carefully, and Brunson clearly chose to play through pain rather than sit. But the public conversation has settled almost entirely on the second half of that equation. It's worth remembering the broader context of what this team just did, because it's the backdrop against which every injury update now gets measured. The Knicks finished 16-3 in the postseason, an .842 winning percentage that matched the 2024 Boston Celtics for second best. Since the format changed to best-of-7 series in all NBA playoff rounds beginning in 2003, with the 2017 Golden State Warriors going 16-1 as the only team ahead of them, and New York won 13 consecutive postseason games, second to Golden State's 15 in a row in 2017, setting records by winning 9 straight road contests and outscoring their postseason opponents by 283 points. That's the run Brunson led while hiding a wrist injury that needed a specialist's table and one of the country's top surgical facilities to fix. Every one of those records now carries an asterisk that reads less like a caveat and more like a badge. The recovery itself is already underway, quietly, the same way the injury was managed in the first place. There's no live tracker, no public rehab updates streaming out of the practice facility, just the same 2-month window ticking down, with training camp circled on the calendar as the first real checkpoint anyone outside the organization will get. For a franchise that waited over 50 years for a championship parade, patience is suddenly the name of the game again, just in a completely different way. The city that celebrated a title in June is now watching a rehab clock in July, hoping the same toughness that carried their captain through a 45-point closeout game translates into a clean recovery over the next several weeks. What happens if the timeline slips isn't something anyone in the organization wants to talk about publicly right now, and understandably so. There's no upside to speculating about worst-case scenarios 3 months out from camp. But the fact that the question even exists is part of why this update spread as fast as it did. A team that just won everything is now waiting on the health of the one player who made all of it possible. And for now, all anyone outside the training room can do is watch the calendar and trust the same guy who scored 45 points on a broken wrist to show up ready when the lights come